Welcome to Workshop Wednesday. Today we're going to look at color theory and have a better understanding of how that actually works. So we're going to look at the color wheel. We're going to understand why is it set up the way it is. Why are certain colors complements of other colors? And there's reasoning behind all that. We're going to go through and we're going to learn how to mix color to create different values. We're going to do two different techniques. We'll use two different medias, We're going to use watercolor, and then we're going to do it again in acrylic paint so you can see the difference in the two different medias. Watercolor will be transparent, acrylic paint will be more opaque.
Today we're going to work with watercolor and learn to mix values to create deeper shades of color. And so you have a sheet like this. It's already been drawn out for you. And what we have done is we're going to make shades with complementary colors. So you'll notice orange is at the top, and it probably didn't print, but the complement of orange is blue. The complement of yellow is violet. And the complement of red is green. So you'll notice we listed the warm tones at the top and the cool tones at the bottom. So what we're going to do is over here is a percentage. So we're going to use watercolor. It's going to be transparent because we're using water with the paint. So therefore it's not opaque as if we were using acrylic paint. So the first thing we're going to do is, since we've got orange, you can mix your orange. So you may not have a set of colors like this. You may have like a Crayola set of colors. And what we'd like you to do is to practice mixing. Instead of just using the orange I have right here, I'd like you to take your yellow and move it over and have a little bit over here on your tray, your mixing tray. Clean your brush and then get some red. Now remember, when you go to mix, notice I used a lot of red, and so it made it a little darker. So if it's not the orange color that I like, then I can come and add a little more yellow to it. Now, if you have a set like this, you have multiple reds. So what I can do is I can try a different red. So I can get my yellow and try a different shade of red and mix it. And notice that one's brighter. Okay, that's a little brighter. So I'm going to use that red, put some more yellow with it. Okay, so when I say 10% of orange, that means I'm going to put a lot more water with it. And a way to do that is to come in first and paint the water on your paper. Now, this is not watercolor paper. It's just a heavier drawing paper that we just were able to make copies of. So I'm going to make that wet, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to lay my color in there. And because it looks wet, you won't see a lot of color. So that'll allow me to make that a 10% and really light. You can kind of see the color. So what you're going to do is that's going to be a 10% of orange. Now, keep in mind, what we want you to do is mix the complement with that. So if I put blue, I'm going to use blue, and you can see the blue right there. That one is very dark. So I think I will try this lighter blue. See how much brighter that one is? So what I'm going to have is my orange, and I'm going to add 10% of blue to that. So while it's wet, I'm going to add a little blue to that and see if it makes it a little bit darker, which it does. Now, I can do that because it was still wet. What you can also do, I have my orange here. I can take my orange and I can put my blue with it, and I can actually mix it on my tray and then paint it. Okay, I'm going to do that same thing for each one of these. So I need my orange, mix my orange again. Okay, so there's my orange. Now I want to add just maybe 20% of blue. Okay, so that means just a speck more than I had a minute ago. And then I'm going to mix it with that orange. So you can see how it's changing that color over here. It might be easier if you mix it on your tray and paint it on your paper, since most of you probably haven't had a lot of experience painting. So maybe if you do more the wet on dry technique, means your paint's wet and your paper's dry, you might have a little more success. Okay, so you can kind of see those showing up. I can mix more paint, and notice I'm changing my brush each time I get a color so I don't mix them on my tray and get my original colors messed up. But I can mix some more, make it brighter, add some more blue to that, and then I can come and do the next one. So each time it should be getting a little bit darker. And the thing about watercolor, it's transparent. So see how I went back over it and it makes that value a little bit darker than it did before. Okay, so I'm going to keep going through here, adding a little more blue each time. And what you'll get to is closer to the middle. See, I made that too dark, so that's going to show up down here. But the closer you get to the middle, it's going to look more brown. So you can kind of see. Starting to look a little more brown. Now, watercolor is transparent, so if you've done this exercise with acrylic paint, you'll notice that it'll be a little more opaque. And so now I'm getting to the 50-50. So I want about the same amount of each color, and you'll see it becomes more brown. Now this is going to look a little bit different than when you did it with acrylic. So notice how the brown that's getting in there. So now I'm going to add a little more blue, because 50-50, so it's more blue than orange actually, to be honest. So you can see it turns it kind of a greenish color, because the blue and the yellow that's in that orange kind of makes it a little more greenish tint to it. Okay, so now I'm going to do my blue, and I'm going to add, I need to mix some orange again. So I got my red, there's my red, and then my yellow. Oops, should clean my brush. And I'm going to put that, it's a darker orange, I'm going to put that in my blue. So remember that I'm only adding just a little 10% to that blue, which would be down here. So see how it took my blue and it dulled it down? And it's not quite as bright because I add the orange to it. So I can keep adding a little more each time. And you'll notice how that value is going to change. So it's starting to look a little more grayish. Okay, so a little more orange. And because I'm mixing my orange each time, my orange is a little bit different value each time I'm doing it. But you'll note this is getting darker. And you want to make sure that you layer your watercolor to get those deeper, richer values. And so when I go back to do 50-50, or 40, because I already did the 50. But see, this is a little more gray, which is really what I want. But that's because I started with the blue. So you can see the difference between starting with the orange and adding the blue versus starting with the blue and adding the orange. So I really need to change that one. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to add a little more of my orange color. with my blue and make that more 50-50. And you'll see that it will be much deeper. Okay? So what I want you to do, see how much better that looks? So what I want you to do is you start with your 10% and work to the middle, and then start 10% on this end and work to the middle. Because you see what happens when you don't. The color's really not quite the same. So you're going to go through and do that with the yellow and the violet, and then the red and the green. The same process. I'll come back and show you a finished one in a moment. But this would be an example as if you had done it in acrylic paint. Okay, you can kind of see how those values, but see how they're deeper and darker and much thicker because acrylic paint is opaque and not transparent. And this is transparent where you see through it. And so you have to build up the layers of color to make things darker. Okay, the last column is a tint. So with this, you're adding white with acrylic paint to make it lighter. But for watercolor, we don't want to do that because if we add a white, the watercolor or a white wash, it makes it more opaque and makes it more pasty looking. And we want it transparent. So what you would do is you would use water to lighten your color. So you can choose whatever color you want here. You're going to make it really light here at 1, so that's water with a little speck of color, and then make it darker each time, add a little more color, and then here 10 would be the pure color. Okay, I'll work on this and then I'll come back on and I'll show you the final result. So here I have it completed, and you can kind of see how I went in and did each of those columns, and you can tell I started with yellow, added the violet, went down to the middle. Here I started with violet, added a little bit of yellow each time, and when you get in the middle, they're going to be pretty close to the same. There'll be a slight difference. You can tell this one's a little more different because I mixed the orange probably a little differently when I did this last one because I had to make more. So get it close. The other thing you'll notice how neat I try to paint my rectangular shapes. And a way to do that is to make sure you have a good flat brush. See, this one's flat. It's versus a round brush. So like this one's rounded and this one's flat. So a flat will allow you to come in, load your brush, and come along those edges. And you can do what we call cutting in. And you're cutting in to the inside and then you just fill it in. And that'll allow you to keep it nice and neat. If you get it too runny, it's going to run into each square. And then you kind of have a soupy mess. Another thing that you can do is I went back over, and you'll notice, especially on the oranges, I wasn't happy with them. So I went back in and mixed some oranges that I liked better. And then I layered. So a lot of these, to get my values a little darker and more even, I layered. I let it dry a little bit, and I went back and added more on top of it. It's still not opaque like acrylic paint is. It's still transparent, but it allows me to get those richer, darker colors, especially when it came to do the tint. So I used Brilliant Red for my choice for this, and I used mostly water, speck of color, added a little more color each time. And then when I got up here, I let it dry and I layered. I let it dry and I added a little bit more of the same value I had just done. And when you layer that same value, it allows it to become a little bit darker, if that hopefully will make sense. So do the best that you can to complete your worksheet, and try to be really neat about it and use a flathead brush so you can cut in and fill those out. Fill each one of those in without it becoming a big mess. Good luck, enjoy, and learn to mix those values.